Welcome to the Bliss Builders podcast, a podcast about mental health
and personal growth
with Kristina von der Heid
and Sandra Diebel.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Bliss Builders podcast. My name is Kristina, and here you see my lovely co-host, Sandra. I'm currently south of Perth on a farm and doing some help eggs, while Sandra is north of Brisbane on a winery and doing some management tasks over there. So we're both struggling a little bit with stable internet connections, so bear with us. Today, we're going to talk about depression and low mood and how to be okay with not being okay. This topic is close to my heart as I had severe depression when I was a child and then later on had low moods, as we all do. And I found a few tools for me that help me get out of that mood. And also, so did Sandra. I think that's why we would like to share some in the hopes that if you are currently going through a low mood or even depression, that you might take away a few things that help you.
Yeah, maybe I would like to jump in and just clarify the definition in the beginning for depression is, like you said, low mood is probably very common, and yeah, we all deal with that from time to time. But to have a deeper look what a depression really is, like I researched and ended up at the page of the World Health Organization. So, and I wrote it down. So just to clarify that, the definition of a depression or depressive disorder is characterized by a low mood or loss of pleasure or interest in activities for long periods of time. What does long periods of time mean? So it means at least for more than 2 weeks, nearly every day, and it lasts most of the day. So these are the official definition for the depression. And then also, because you've mentioned it a little bit earlier, there are 3 stages. So they are characterized in mild, moderate, and severe. And you actually said that you had even a severe depression, right?
Yeah, as a child.
Oh wow! As a child, even that's very early. Can
Yes.
you tell us more about that and what caused it?
What caused it? I mean, I have my own thoughts about what caused it. My psychotherapist at the time had different ideas of what caused it. I
Right.
was in therapy at the time, and my therapist pretty much blamed my parents and also said that it was because I had to be in a cast right after birth, and that was the cause. While I personally think that it was triggered by, yes, to a degree, my home life and my surrounding at home, but also my awareness of what was going on in the world. Because even though I was just like around about 7 years old when the whole thing started,
Oh wow.
I was consuming quite a lot of, well, news, and I also like reading a lot. So I was consuming, especially like later, it got more severe because I was reading a lot about Um, well, and also watching documentaries about the state of the world, so wars, famine. Um,
So you had the
yeah,
negative news and the negative perspective of the world the whole time in front of you, right?
yes, and then also seeing, because like I was asking my parents at the time, um, why those things are occurring, and I was quite sensitive in a way, and I asked them why they're not doing anything against them, and my parents always told me like, well, they went on demonstrations when they were younger, but then they realized that nothing happened, and they therefore gave up, which was not really a great answer, because it kind of like um, transported the feeling of hopelessness to me. And then, yeah, I think being too focused on a lot of those things while at the same time being bullied in school at the time, and also having relational issues with my family itself, by feeling not understood, by feeling neglected, and other things, I think was just an
Why not
unhealthy
understood?
mix. Say it again.
What, why not understood and rejected?
Why not understood and rejected? Well, as I said, I was quite sensitive. So if I would cry about any of those topics, because I, well, felt empathy, or, well, not sure if that's considered empathy, but like I would cry about the state of the world here
Worry?
and there, especially what?
Worry about the circumstances? You're worried about the circumstances in the world?
It's not about, it's not necessarily worry, because it's like a lot of it is it's sadness. It was just like a lot of sadness about the state of the world, not necessarily worry, because worry kind of implies that you're directly involved, so it was more just sadness for what it is.
Okay.
um yeah.
So they couldn't relate to your sadness.
Yes, they could not relate to my sadness. They would basically, well, tell me to stop crying, tell me to go to my room, and then ignore me for hours, because they, well, couldn't deal with my emotions, probably also not their own. But most importantly, I think they had hardened themselves to such a degree that they just could not deal with a lot of things, and also could not understand. Um, like later on, my mom and dad both told me that they struggled with understanding me, and understanding like this depression, and understanding how it can get to that point.
Yeah.
And for me, it was always kind of like this thought of like, how can everyone else be so numb to what's going on in the world? How can they be so desensitized that it doesn't make them sad? At least that was my view at the time. And then also this fact that I felt very hopeless, because I felt like there's nothing I could do, due to the fact that my parents kind of were like, well, yeah, there's not much you can do. So they were not really having any ideas, or any, like, there was no support, in the sense of support to kind of be able to become active. Like, um for example, they could have been like, oh, so you're sad about whales, and whales being like dying, and ocean pollution, and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Well, if that's the case, then maybe, I mean, like, nowadays there's a little bit more awareness around that, but maybe then volunteer at a like nonprofit organization, or research into how you can kind of like reduce on plastic or such things. There's more knowledge around that now. Back then, especially with no internet, there were just books, and I think the knowledge around that was rather low, and my parents were definitely not involved in anything in that regard at all. Either way, I don't want to drift too far apart. That kind of like were triggers for me that like made me feel hopeless. And then also the same thing in regards to my personal relationships with my parents, my family, my surroundings in school. I got bullied in school for basically being different and probably also having to like issues picking up on certain social clues here and there. And that made me feel like I don't know, I feel like it got me into this thought spiral of not being good enough and having something wrong with me. That
Well,
was
we
kind
already
of like
have an episode of that. Yeah, we're gonna put that in the show notes.
mhm. So yeah, this thought pattern started that something must be wrong with me, as apparently no one could really understand me, and at the same time also I would be judged a lot for it, and I would be um, not only criticized but also shamed for it. You know, like when people say stuff like that, like why are you crying? That doesn't hurt. When people are just invalidating your perception and your reality, and then you're kind of like starting to doubt your own senses, your own abilities, and then other people saying, um, how can you be so stupid to not see the situation like this? And um, it's hard to to even come up with those things. But yeah, basically that kind of like all of that led to, okay, something must be wrong with me because everyone else seems to get along pretty well and see the world similarly to me, like, and I'm kind of like different from
You're a
that, so
little bit
something must be
different.
wrong with
When they
me.
go right, you go left, right?
Yes. So yeah, the thought evolved that like something must be wrong with me. And then due to what my parents said about me and like the people around me said about me, it started to become like I started to develop the thoughts of like, or the feeling of hopelessness, because I felt like I'm bored this way. There's nothing I can change about it. That was my thought at the time. There's nothing I can change about it. And there's nothing I can change about the state of the world. So I kind of just have to endure all of it. And well, that got me really deep into a depression, because if you don't have any hope, because it seems like there's like the people around you, especially as a child, you don't know as much as an adult. So as a child, it's more like, well, there's nothing you can change about the world. There's nothing you can change about you. So
No
you will have to suffer.
self-effectiveness and no self-effectiveness, right? So, what were your symptoms, or how did this appeared, the depression, in your personal life?
Um, well, crying a lot, suicidal thoughts at worst.
At 7,
Um,
at the age of 7.
Between 7 and 11, it was like a long,
My
constant thing. So there were here and there, far apart, good moments in between, of course. So it's not just crying every day, and also like you can only cry that much. So there was a lot of um, lethargy, a lot of kind of like sleep issues, so like staying up late as a child. Um, Either lack of sleep or sleeping a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely issues with focus and concentration in school.
Yeah.
Kind of retreating. So I was spending like a lot of time alone.
You've chosen that you wanted to be alone?
Partially yes, partially no. So especially when I was when I was crying, I was usually seeking connection and seeking connection to my parents. But that was not a given. So a lot of times I would end up alone in my room to kind of like process my emotions by myself because my parents didn't know how at the time, or well, they don't know how. And I think that kind of like integrated itself into me so that I kind of feel like to this day that if I feel certain emotions that I retreat and deal with them by myself. Because I mean, I like now as a grown up, I made a few experiences where I could actually feel my feelings in front of others without being shamed for them. But there's still many cases where that is still being shamed and where that is still triggering other people too. So my go-to is to retreat, and it was kind of created at that time, I guess.
Hmm.
Yeah, and at the worst moments, I can't even pinpoint it, but yeah, at the lowest point, it got down to suicidal thoughts and plans and uh, threats to an extreme. Um,
What is actually, I just want to throw in a fact here as well, from the WHO. They said suicide is the fourth common cause of death for people between 15 and 29. What was, yeah, very hard, and maybe underlines how much these low moods and depressions, and maybe that people are not able to share, or to connect with others about that, what this actually causes, and how deep it is, as there are 280 million people estimated in the world that suffer from depression. And I reckon, especially when I had a look at the definition and also the symptoms and the stadiums, that actually I'm pretty sure there's so much more, as you don't even recognize maybe that you have a depression because it's maybe in the earlier stage, or you just have some of those symptoms.
mm,
But it is very common, and that's actually the thing, that we have to be aware of that. And also it is very tricky to, let's say, that you get to know how to deal with a person that is in this low mood or depression, because everyone also would like it a little bit differently maybe, but probably where it comes together in the end is maybe the understanding part and the being there and the caring and listening.
mhm,
As I personally wasn't in a depression. Well, maybe now when I had a look at all those, maybe a very mild one, but definitely my mom. She was in a burnout as well and had a illness last year where she definitely had depressions as well. And I just remember that it was so hard for me to deal with that. And I didn't, especially the first time with the burnout, I was 17 at this time. And I definitely couldn't handle it. And it probably made it worse. Or it definitely disconnected her to probably us, my dad and me, a little bit, as we were overwhelmed with how to deal with that. At some stage, you want to give some understanding. At some point, you don't want the person to be dragged down and down and down and down. So you also want to lift the person up at some point. But it feels like it's very hard to find the right level, how much you should get closer to the person and closer to the person's stage, maybe, to meet the person where the person is, and when and how much to lift up without without putting too much pressure on the other one, or saying, hey, it's not okay how you are at the moment. So I felt, and still, and I actually, because I was in contact with my mom before about this topic a little bit, and I apologized to her how I dealt, or how I not dealt with that this 2 times in her life. And actually, I would like to record an episode with them as well when they are here and visiting me. But yeah, that's the only thing I can definitely say, that also as a person around the person with depression, it's quite difficult, overwhelming, and you're a little bit clueless how to deal with that best. So maybe for your family it was, or it seems like it was a bit the same. So did it change over time, for example? Was there more understanding?
No. That is, I don't feel like there was more understanding from the other side at some point. I think in regards to what other people can do, or how other people can deal with people with depression, I can't speak for everyone, but I know what I feel like would have supported me, which is well, while you're in a depression, you're kind of like having an illness of thought, in the sense of like your thoughts are really, really, really dark. And the problem is, when you're looking at life from that perspective, you cannot understand the happier perspective of the other people. The same way the happier people can't understand your perspective that is such, like, so low. And only if you've experienced and went through those phases can you understand the thinking of a person with depression. Or even, like, it can get to the state where you're not thinking at all anymore, where you're literally just feeling really terrible. And and where you're kind of like dissociated and numb. You don't have any pleasures, any interests. You're kind of just like existing for time. And I think what can help with that is twofold. One is literally just holding space and being there, and that's a hard thing to do for for anyone. Which literally just means give hugs in silence. Give hugs in silence, without putting your happy thoughts on them, without telling them, oh, it's going to be okay, without telling them, pretty much in silence, just silence. Because then your mismatching thoughts can't really trigger something in both people. So just in silence, give hugs, because hugs itself, like hugs, well, are like they make our bodies yeah, no, like they make our bodies put out oxytocin. Sorry, I forgot the word for that. So you get oxytocin from it. You get like a what?
Sorry, the geese are a bit loud. To calm down the body, isn't it? Hugs.
Either way, yes. So hugs, silence. Another thing would be just literally validating the feelings as good as you can. But therefore, of course, you need to kind of understand where they're coming from. But basically be like, hey, it's okay that you're upset. I think you don't even have to understand too much of it, but literally just like hugging someone, being like, hey, it's okay that you're feeling that way. I'm here for you. Just let it out. Cry as long as you need. Because I feel like a lot of the reasons why it drags on so long with depression and low moods is because you're kind of not allowing yourself to feel it fully because it's not allowed. I feel like a part of the issue that I had, like that I might have had back then, or well, that's a theory of mine, is that due to my parents and my surroundings shaming me for my sadness, I would not feel that sadness fully, and therefore it would become prolonged, you know? Because like if you don't feel an emotion in the moment that it comes up and you kind of like shame for it and you kind of like suppress it or suppress it halfway, then it kind of like gets stuck and then it comes up again and again and again. And if you do
It's like
constantly
a
do
flu.
that, like it's like what?
It's like a flu, for example, where or a cold. So when you have the first symptoms and you say, it's gonna be good, it's everything all right. You take some medicine and you keep going and you push yourself to work and act normal. Your body still has the virus, the bacteria is in it, and the thing is that they gonna come up um, after a bit again. And so this is why we keep being half ill for such a long time, because we doesn't allow the virus, the bacteria to come out and to really be sick.
Okay.
So
Um,
maybe a bit of a comparison to that. So if you allow it to come out to be sick, you are maybe laying bed for a week or a couple of days and you sweat and everything gets out, but then everything cool is done. You're done. You can keep on. You can keep going and everything is fine again. Well, when you try to hold it back and you say, nah, everything is fine, and you don't really face it, it's just a kind of delay and it will always come up a little bit here, a little bit there, for a very long time. So it feels a little bit like that when you tell me this with the depression, the low moods.
Maybe, but as I said, that's just like a theory because I'm now with the stuff I've learned in the meantime, like validating your own feelings and feeling your own feelings. I feel like if I could have done that, I couldn't have done that because I didn't have the knowledge, nor did I have any examples of that in that time around me. But I think it could have helped to kind of like accept yourself and accept the feelings and emotions while they're happening and be kind to yourself, which I think is big part of um well the reason for like when depression is there. I feel like it has a lot to do also with not being kind in your own self, having negative thoughts, um and it's all kind of linked together. um Another thing is there's this theory that depression is a lack of expression. And I feel that that makes absolute sense because I was not expressing all of my feelings. Um, and at the time, in phases where I had a bit more energy, I would paint and draw a lot to kind of express myself somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And that would make me feel slightly better for a very short time, but like it did, like it helped a little bit. um, Either way, I feel like if you have someone there who literally just gives you a hug, listens, and listens without constantly giving their own thoughts to it, but literally just listens, maybe even asks some questions about what's going on. That, of course, also depends on how open the person is who has depression, if they're willing to talk about it, because not everyone is. But just hugging people and being there for them and not judging them for what they're feeling. I think that's the biggest thing, because you're not really helping when you kind of like be like, hey, everything's okay, you're gonna be okay, because a person in that state doesn't believe it, because if they would believe it, they wouldn't be in that state. and and you saying that is also not really gonna make them believe. The other thing is also like this, like, why are you upset? There's no reason to be that sad. Also not a good thing to do,
What is,
because
to be honest, maybe a nice thought from the other person in the background. So it's they probably gonna try to cheer you up, to help you to feel positive, look on the positive side. That's also what I tried a little bit with my mom.
mm,
In the first, let's say the first time I did it a bit more rough because I really couldn't understand, and I said, oh, why you muck around like that? Just kind of do it or live. Yeah. What was definitely not the best reaction at this stage. And the second time I had a bit more understanding as I was already way further in my process. And I also, because it was so hard, tried to cheer her up a bit and also support her with some exercises, with some mental health exercises, kind of, where you focus on your self-esteem, etc. We try to build that up, but she was at this stage still not really able to, let's say, to implement that, as they were really easy exercises, and she, yeah, came back to me and said, oh, I can't do that. And for me, it was like, why you can't do that? It's like, just fill it out, just do the fucking exercise thing. But of course, you are in a completely different state than the other person that is next to you. And this is something you can't relate to if you haven't been in this situation by yourself. And that's the thing. We
mm,
always should try to put ourselves in their shoes, what is really, really hard when you haven't been there. But at least give it a try. And if you can't understand, that's also okay, because if you haven't, some people have been through very shit stuff, and not everyone did. So it's absolutely fair enough that you can say, I can't relate to that. But at least, like you said, being open to listen and try to give the empathy that they at least feel safe to share and to open up, and also make them feel okay with being not okay. That's the point. So I definitely, I mean, I didn't say it to my mom like that, but I definitely should have had even more patience, or actually in the end the thing was the understanding and the connection, where she found someone else with the same illness where she could relate to her, and so they connected really good, and this cheered her up a lot, because you have now a relation that is very helpful and that can understand you, and this is so important in these stages. But yeah, actually, to have the patience, like you said, also maybe to listen, you, if you have a little bit of empathy, or actually you're gonna develop this over time, and especially if you want to, and if you put some time and effort in it, you get more and more feeling of the other person, what they how far you can go maybe? Is there a hug and a silence? Is this it? Or could you say a few words? Is it better to actually at least meet the person at this stage? So something I personally learned so far from the people I was with is it is always good to start and meet them where they are. So like that expressing your understanding, even if you haven't been in the situation. But I can understand that must be very, very hard, or that must be terrible. So express your understanding so they feel safe to keep going with their sharings. And yeah, they feel understood and feel okay. And because it is a very tricky thing is if you go too far, or if you start with the don't see the negative, the world is good, the world is fine thing, you are maybe too far apart from the person. So like you said, it's hard to, you can't grab their hand if you are too far apart. That's the point. So you have to start to get closer in the beginning before you can help the other person. And this was something very difficult for me to understand and to figure out, where maybe also a little bit too selfish. I was in my growing stage, I would say, and I developed all that stuff for myself, and a happy and positive mind. And then you have another person, a very close person, that is in such a negative thought process. And of course you want to help, but at the same time, if you can't reach them from where you are and you have to kind of lower yourself to their mood, it's also a bit difficult that you don't get caught in this negative stage. So I find this a very tricky balance, actually.
Yeah, I think the issue that most people have when dealing with a person with depression is that they say they want to help, but actually they want the depressed person to feel better so that they can feel better, because their negative mood affects them. So and that's like, if you look, like, if I think about all the people at that time, like my family, and the friend I had at the time, and my sister, because I had one friend, um, that they all kind of like, with their cheering up, you could feel like people can sense intention, and the message that comes across with everything you're doing then is kind of like, it's not acceptable that you're sad, so be happy, because if you're not happy, I'm gonna be sad. So that then in the depressed person triggers several things like guilt, because you want to feel better, but you're just not able to at the moment, so you're feeling guilty because now the other person feels bad. Then the other thing is also anger, because you're kind of like, well, just leave me alone. If you don't want, like, I can't change the state at the moment, like I would like to, but I can't change the state I'm in right now. But then instead of trying to make me something that I'm not, just leave me alone then, because I don't want to make you sad and then feel guilty about it. So anger. Then the other thing is shame, because you're feeling ashamed, like, why can I not feel as good as like they do? Why do I feel like so shit, and so on? So it's not helpful at all, which is why I think the best thing, like, if you truly want to help another person, the best thing you can do is, first of all, look inward and realize, do you really want to help that person, or do you just want them to feel better so you can feel better? Because if that's the case, just go somewhere else. Because when I was depressed, it was more helpful if the people would be happy somewhere else, and I know at least they're good, because that can also be inspiration. It can be inspiration if you see them doing things that make them happy, and then you don't feel guilty about it. So a lot of times I actually felt better when they were not there than when they were there but with the wrong intentions. So if you really truly do want to help, and you can deal with the person being unhappy, because it doesn't affect you, or you know it might affect you, but you're okay with it, and you truly want to help, the best thing, as I said, is literally give a hug and be silent. Because everything you say, like this whole thing, like, oh yeah, that's terrible, like that's also something, like, while I was depressed, I hated it when people came with their pity party, because it did not help. When people, because like a lot of times they would say stuff that would show more about what they thought than the actual reality of what I was feeling. So a lot of times people would be like, oh yeah, the state of this and that is terrible, and I would just feel like, nah, yeah, nah, you're not getting it. So it was not very helpful. So that's why I say, like, hugs, silence, and basically just being like, hey, it's okay. Literally, if there was a script, be like, hey, it's okay that you're feeling this way. You can feel this way as long as you want to. Just let it all out. I'm here for you if you want a hug. Otherwise, I'm just going to sit here in silence. There's nothing you need to do. There's nothing you need to be. You're okay the way you are. I love you. That's it. No, no, you need to get better. No, like in some weird ways. No, pushing for positive perspectives, like just being there, which is the hardest thing to do for most people in any emotion. The hardest thing to do is literally not do anything, because all we
Yes, yeah.
most of the time want to do is we want to fix those people because we have difficulties dealing with their emotions. So in that case, if you're aware enough and you notice yourself being in this fixing mode, just be happy somewhere else. Because the thing is, in depression, there's a high chance that you get to this lowest low point, which I did, which was, well, suicidal thoughts. And then there's two ways of how it can go. And, well, to be fair, that is all just my experience. So take from it what resonates. Otherwise, seek professional help.
That's definitely a good advice anyway. So especially when
Yes.
you're in a severe depression, um, when you see very, very strong symptoms or you have difficulties, please contact an expert, as we are no psychiatrists, and they definitely can help you also with diagnosis or, for example, medication. And the
Mhm.
medication can help, especially in a combination with some talk therapy. But yeah, maybe just to feel a little bit more understood, or to get some idea about how others deal with that. That's why we record this. And so, yeah, sorry for the interruption. Keep going.
Um, so what helped me to get out of this whole thing was at the lowest point when I was kind of like ready to end it all. I got really, really angry because I was like, how can it be that a kid, like a literal child, is already so sad about the state of the world, and so kind of like how can it be that a literally kid that just got to this planet already wants to leave this planet again? And I got really, really angry, and I was like, you know what, fuck that, fuck everyone, fuck the state of the world. I'm just gonna do whatever the fuck I want in each moment, whatever makes me happy. Fuck school, fuck my parents, fuck pretty much everyone. And I was just getting angry. And anger is the best feeling to get you out of depression, in my opinion, because anger builds energy. So anger gives you energy back. So you become a little bit rebellious, and you're like, you know what? If they all don't understand me, if I'm an outcast, if I'm all those things, well, then I might as well have fun, break rules, do whatever slight things that can bring me joy. And that kind of gave me hope again, because a lot of parts of like what kept me in depression is probably also the feeling of having to follow all those rules, the feeling of going to school, then studying like your whole life, like being kind of like planned out, then working and then dying, and it just all seemed so hopeless to me. And I did not see any joy in it. So I was kind of like, you know what? If that's the case, fuck it. Then I'm not gonna, I don't know. Then I'm not gonna do all of my homework. I'm not gonna follow all the rules, and I'm gonna make sure that I'm okay, and I'm gonna have fun no matter what society thinks. So anger is really, really helpful. I think my theory is that if you can make a depressed person really angry, that can actually also be helpful, because if you can get them into anger, even at you, like if they get really angry, they get a boost of energy that they did not have in the state before. They get a boost of energy and they get a boost of rebellion. And they might even get to the point where they're kind of like, well, I might still be at the stage where I want to end my life, but first I'm gonna fuck you up, because they're so angry. So it definitely keeps them alive for a while. And it also makes sense if you've ever looked at the emotional guidance scale or emotional scales. Depression, sadness, and fear are at the very bottom, and then a step above it is anger, or well, somewhere above it is anger. So if you can get people into anger, they're a little bit higher in their emotion. And what I've learned, well, recently, is that like you can literally just walk up that scale by choosing the next higher emotion. So going from, yeah, for example, going from like fear, sadness, depression to the next one, which is anger, because it's already a better feeling, even though it might not seem like that for outside people. And then from anger, you go to I don't know, to worry, to doubt, and you make your way up, or to overwhelmment, make you up the like make your way up the scale, basically, to better feelings, because you can't get from fear, depression, like especially from depression, you cannot just jump to happiness. um you
That's
can
a very nice way to
pretend.
do it step by step, actually.
Yeah.
And we should put the scale probably on our Patreon. Let's do that for our listeners.
Hmm. So yeah, I got angry, and then I got angry, and I was kind of like refusing to give up by that point. And the other thing that also made me angry, so I went, like, when I had my kind of like halfway suicidal attempt, my parents put me into therapy, and therapy was absolutely not helpful. My experience, I had two
Can I
therapists, and both of them were.
sorry, can I interrupt you here? So how did they notice? Did you told them that you have suicidal thoughts, or how did they notice?
um Well, let's say my sister was a witness to something that I'm not sure if I want to go into detail, because it's quite personal.
Okay.
Uh, yes.
All right. I think it gives an idea.
So yeah, let's say my sister was a witness of a suicide attempt, and then told my parents, and then they put me into therapy, which then did not help because, well, they mostly blamed my parents. And that did not help, because my parents, who were already like kind of like not knowing what to do, then also on top of that felt guilty. And then of course came back with anger towards me, because they were like, what are you telling your therapist, kind of thing, which is not helpful, which is a little bit different when you're an adult, because then your therapist won't talk to your parents. And they're actually sworn to confidentiality. But when you're a child, it sucks. Oh, well, it sucked for me because it was not helpful at all. And also, I was looking for solutions, for answers, and neither my parents nor the therapist could give me any. So when I was in anger, and when I was feeling, let's say, slightly better, um, I was starting to look for solutions because I was like, well, what can I do? What is there to do? Because like it can't be that like my parents and everyone else is so happy, although there's no solutions to nothing, because that's how it seemed. And luckily, I found a book at that time, which was about um, self-esteem, and it fell out of a bookshelf, nearly hit me on the head. So it was definitely fated to cross my path, and I'm extremely grateful that it did, because this was like the first self-help book. I mean, like I think 11 at the time. I've had gone through like, well, years of depression at that stage, and I read that book, and it was like, in it, it was kind of like um, sharing the message that you are not what other people say you are, that you can change yourself, that you can change your circumstances, that you have choices, that you literally can grow, that you can become the thing you want to become, and that like all the negative beliefs you have are just beliefs, and beliefs are just thoughts that you keep on thinking. And just the fact that it showed me, wait a minute, I can change myself. I don't have to be the version that everyone else around me says I am. I don't have to be what other people make me to be. Because I remember at that time, due to being um, invalidated and shamed for my emotions, I felt like I was very weak. I felt like I was a weakling, like I was a loser, a victim. So I was very much in this victim mentality. And I felt like absolutely powerless because I thought I was born that way. I thought I was born um, like with something that was wrong with me, which is why I was sad all the time, because apparently everyone else is not sad.
But
Because that was my
actually,
view.
we also have to say, as we are talking out of a Central European perspective, we can be very, very lucky how we were born. Actually, that's also very important. So if we compare us to the rest of the world, we definitely have a high standard in nearly everything. It's just relating to the thing, that you said. I thought I'm a victim and I was born that way. I know you're relating to different kind, but I just wanted to underline that the way how we came to this world was definitely a privilege compared to others already that are probably in these areas or in this yeah, let's say areas where you actually were sad about.
Yes, and I mean, like, we're all like, especially now, we're all grateful for where we are, where we were born, and all that. But if you would say that to a depressed person, that's like literally the worst, because it has
No, no,
nothing
I
to do
just,
with the
yeah,
topic,
no,
and,
absolutely.
and it's
It's
also like,
not that I wanted to say that in this stage. I just wanted to make it sure as maybe listeners from all over the world, listen to us. So I just wanted to remind ourselves about the circumstances, how we grew up.
yeah, but like just growing, like this is a mental issue. It has nothing to do with the circumstances where you grow up. It's like, you know, it's
It
like, yes,
is.
you
I
can be
just I
privileged, but
just
if you
wanted
grow
to
up in the
say,
Western world, in an abusive family, for example, and you get beaten and raped, you don't necessarily are better off than someone who just lives with less things. Things are not the thing, like, things don't really make us happy. Yes, you can have. And healthcare is also another topic. So let's not get into this. Let's stay on topic.
that's all
And
right. But I just wanted to underline that where we are coming from, that, to make sure that as we have listeners probably from all areas of the world, to say where we were coming from. That's all I wanted to do. Anyway, come back
that
to
is, I think, yeah, I think you meant well, but like, especially like if we have listeners who are in a low mood or depressed, it's just gonna feel like it's just gonna trigger guilt in them, because then they're like, well, I should not feel the way I feel. because
That's not,
of where I was
and that's
born.
not what I. Okay, but let's take this as an example. That's not what I
No,
want.
I know that I know that is not your intention. That was not your intention, and I'm just saying that, like, if you're in that state, it's not a good thing to hear, because then you feel guilty on top of all the stuff. And as I said, like, the guilt shame spiral starts, which, yeah. And it's also kind of like invalidating people who have depression, because it's kind of like, just because you're born in better circumstances, you're not allowed to feel sad.
No, I don't.
That's
I
how it comes
absolutely
across.
don't. No, I absolutely don't say that. I Okay, the intention was to give our listeners. Let's say there are listeners that just hear this episode the first time. They don't know us before, so that was actually my intention, to just give an idea where we were coming from, what our circumstances are, as this might, have also an effect as you were coming out of a country that is in war, for example, or anything. And I don't say that the depression in a high standard country is less worse than being happy in, a low income country or anything. So it is very individual. Um, yeah, that's actually all the background to that.
Hmm. Okay.
Okay.
Um. Back.
Why did you stop?
So, okay, I'm just gonna jump back to the part where, like, it helped me to find that book, self-help, and to realize and get the mentality that you can change yourself, which is, I think, a little bit different if you're grown up, because then you might know that you can change yourself, and you might know that you can change circumstances. But for me, that was a big step, especially as a child, because as a child, I felt really powerless, and like there's nothing I can do. And when I found this book, I realized, oh, wait a minute, I can do things. I actually can change myself, and I don't have to just stay in this state. And in that book also, it gave you a lot of affirmations. At the time, it was called, like, more like auto suggestions and self hypnosis, and it was more like from a science perspective. But what it did is basically, like, if, like, all the beliefs you have at this moment are just thoughts that you repeatedly thought, or things that you repeatedly heard. So if people around you tell you you're weak, you're a loser, you're lazy, you're ugly, whatnot. Like, if they constantly tell you bad things, and then you're also on top of that thinking bad things constantly, you start to believe those things about you. And that literally can lead to depression as well, because if you're just hearing too many negative things about you and you start believing those things, you can get literally sucked into depression. But the good thing is, if you become aware of it, you can reverse it. And what I did at the time is literally write down who I'd like to be, ideally, write down all the traits I would like to have in the present tense. So I am smart, I am strong, I'm intelligent, I um I'm pretty, and so on and so forth. And I would write them all down. I would record myself, and then I would play the tape at night and listen to me while I was sleeping, or I would read those affirmations um, on a daily basis to kind of like reprogram my mind. And the thing is, just the fact that I had hope, and the fact that I now knew I could change myself, already made me feel so much better. So that kind of, like, all of that lifted me out of my depression. But that is just depression at that time, because it's another thing when you have depressive episodes later on, when you already had that knowledge, when you already know those things, and you get to depressive episodes where it's no longer about feeling powerlessness because you can't change things, but kind of like feeling hopeless because you feel like the changing things are not working. Or where you get into a newer level where it becomes a lot of pressure to constantly become better and better and better, and you kind of get depressed over the fact that you will never be good enough no matter how much effort you put into it. So that can trigger other episodes, which then it's still helpful to do those affirmations, I think, because like it's literally forcing your brain to think a different thought, and you can't have two thoughts at the same time. So while you're thinking that one thought, you can't think another thought. And if you think those things like thoughts often enough, they become beliefs. So whenever I now get into a low mood or depression, what I do first and foremost is validate my own emotions, which is, I think, the best thing you can do. You can feel like, if you feel an emotion coming up, you feel where it is in your body. Is it like a pressure on your chest? Is it like in your throat? Is it in your head? Like, where do you feel that emotion? And you kind of just pay attention to it. And then, I don't know, I just have like this inner conversation with myself, be like, hey, it's okay. It's absolutely normal that you're upset, that you're angry, and then I'm just naming what I think that emotion could be and seeing how it feels. And then I'm just like, hey, it's absolutely okay to feel that. It's absolutely understandable. It's okay. Um, I love myself anyway. So I would just literally be like, I love you. It's okay to feel that way. I'm here for you. Because, sorry, in a way, it's like talking to your inner child, because that inner child never had that validation. And it helps to see yourself as this inner child and be like, hey, grown up me is now here for you. I'm there. I love you. And it's okay to feel that feeling and to validate yourself, and then to process that emotion and feel it. So you're kind of like processing it by literally just paying attention to it, by seeing the feeling, and by kind of being like, it's okay to be there. And usually, if you're just completely accepting that it's there without trying to get rid of it, it leaves within 90 seconds, which is not long. It's like 3 minutes. It just leaves because it has been felt fully. And the only reason why it stays a lot of the times is because you're still trying to get rid of it. So you're not completely accepting it. You're still trying to kind of like make yourself happy again, or make yourself feel something else, or trying to logically analyze it too much, instead of just, well, feeling it, which is not the easiest thing to do, but I can definitely recommend starting to practice it, and you will get better with time. So doing that, and then also refocusing on affirmations. So now when I get into a really low mood, I start listening to my affirmations again. I start doing that again. I start reading my affirmations. I start listening to 528 hertz frequencies or 432 hertz frequencies, whatever feels best at the moment at night. And that usually picks me up a little bit again. I think the best thing, though, is getting out ahead of it if I can. So the best thing to help me in that sense is to take some time right after I woke up and sit somewhere where I have peace of mind, where there's no one disturbing me, and go into gratitude pretty much, or like appreciation.
Yeah, yeah,
And start with things that, and start with things that are very general, that might not even have anything to do with me. So I just appreciate that there's air, that there's trees, that I don't know, I can hear the birds, or that there's sunshine, or that there's a nice flower pot, or like I'm just literally witnessing the things around me. And when I think it's pretty or when I think it's nice, I appreciate it. And by doing that, as I said, like you cannot think two thoughts at the same time. So by doing that, you kind of leading your thought train in a different, more positive direction, and it gets momentum and it becomes stronger. So at a certain point, your brain is kind of like, okay, so that's the direction we're going in today. And then it will give you more positive thoughts that are like that, because your brain is kind of always like what you're focusing on. And then it tries to find like an algorithm. So like, you're focused on that. You like that. Okay, we're going to give you more of that. So that can kind of like get you out of things, or, well, it does for me. So if I, if I have the time, if I'm aware, then I do that. Like I sit outside and I try to focus on things to appreciate, to kind of lift myself out of there. But yeah, a lot of times only when I get into a really, really, really low mood do I remember to actually validate my feelings, and do I remember to listen to my affirmations again, and do I remember to do those practices again. And then once I'm happy, I always forget about all of them. Uh, but and then it's an up and down movement. But the good thing is, once you've overcome severe depression, and once you've gone through that, you can.
Yeah.
And then it's never going to be that bad again, in a way, because you've already gone through it. So it can kind of like give you this feeling that everything else is you're able to. Yes, because like what we are afraid of in any case most of the time is our emotions. So we're not afraid of, like, I don't know, certain things happening to us. We are afraid of the emotions we will feel. And if you can realize that as a depressed person, you probably already felt the worst feelings and you dealt with them and you were able to go through them, it's not necessarily something you want to go through again. But if you learn to kind of be kind to yourself while it's happening, at some point you get to the stage where you don't have to fear anything anymore, because like, even if I get to that state, I know I will be kind to myself. I know I will validate my feelings. I know I will hold myself and I will be there for myself. So there's nothing to fear. The only thing, like, why we fear stuff, in my opinion, is because we're judging ourselves while we're having the feelings. We're making ourselves down. So a lot of time, for a long time, I was scared of falling into depression again because of the way my mind was thinking and talking to myself at the time, and like thinking, like, the way it was badly thinking about myself. So I was like, the way I was seeing myself. So I did not want to fall back into that, but the emotions itself are not the problem. Because once you are kind to yourself, or you even see it as a success that you're able to feel those emotions now, and that you're able to see them and validate them, it takes away the fear. So you're not scared of it anymore. So yeah, I can highly recommend that. And it's yeah, once again, it's just something that helped me. It doesn't mean that it helps everyone. I also did not get onto any medication, because well, luckily, especially when I was very young, my mom didn't want me to be on any medication. And to a degree, I'm quite.
Recommended for children, I've heard.
Huh? Say that again.
It's also not very recommended for children or an adolescent.
Yeah, I'm very happy that, like, I did not get into medication, because although there's like facts on the internet, which I will hand to you in a second, that depression can alter your brain, which it does, because it's like, as I said, like, it's something that repeats, but you can always alter it back, and you don't need necessarily medication for that, in my opinion. I'm not a doctor though, so, and it's all up to you. But I'm very happy that I did not go on medication, because they usually also have side effects. And a lot of the SSRIs that you get for depression, literally, if you like, I once later on, like a few years back, I had panic attacks, and I went to a doctor, and he gave me antidepressants and said they might help. And I read the little note that is in the package, and it literally said that it can give you suicidal thoughts, blackouts for several hours, that can cause you to harm yourself and other people, and you're not aware or conscious in that time frame, and you will not remember that time frame either. And there were like this long list of horrible things, that like side effects that were apparently not even that unlikely. And I was like, I'd rather be sad than taking something that might potentially lead to me blacking out and harming someone.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm very happy that I did not take those things, because, well, as I said, but that's my opinion. And I also think that, like, by consciously doing affirmations, you can also rewire your brain and create new neuronal pathways in your brain. So even though depression might have changed certain pathways, you can change them into you can mold your brain into a new direction. So I would say, in my opinion, don't let any doctors tell you that depression has a bad effect on your brain. It might have had, but you can change it back. You're powerful enough to do so. You don't need to necessarily take medication, in my opinion. But that's just me.
Also depending on the person, the stage, where it comes from,
Yes.
etc., etc. So I know that, for example, for my mom, it was very, very helpful at these stages, and she literally told me earlier she might not be here anymore without the medication. So it definitely can help, especially in the beginning, where it is so hard to get out of these negative thoughts by yourself. So with the medication, this helps you to stimulate your brain a little bit more, so that you actually get at least into a more neutral stage where you are able to think, validate, evaluate, investigate, and all those things. So it is very individual, and that's also very important for me to say, that there is no one fits all rule, and it also depends on how heavy it is, especially when you have some light symptoms. It's maybe more the connection or the relation part that is missing, where it quite often loneliness, where we're also going to make an episode about that, where you don't have another person to talk to that understands you, that cares about you. So this relation is missing. That can be already very, very effective for a lot of things, and can help you to at least, get one stage higher on this feeling scale, or maybe 2 or 3, where you can then make your way up to. When you're completely down and you're not able to do that by yourself, medication can be an opportunity to lift you up a little bit, but definitely recommended to combine that with some kind of therapy, or at least talking, that it's very, very rare that the medication stands for itself. So, but all in all, I can relate to your recommendation quite good. A little bit differently, probably, but when you were telling me that, I recognized that it was a little bit the same recipe for me. I would not say depression, but how to deal with low moods at the moment nowadays. I remember in my childhood, for example, I had definitely heaps of low mood phases, and I was in this victim role. This victim role was a big thing. I've seen myself with it in, and probably, I don't know, I I haven't had a role model that stepped out of some of those victim stages, I would say, at this time. And so it was hard for me to build up this self effectiveness, the self esteem. So I was in these low moods for a long time, actually. And yeah, I'm not sure if you nowadays would see them as a mild depression. Maybe I never get diagnosed or something. Can be. But I would say the recipe nowadays I agree with is definitely awareness. In the beginning, being aware of your feelings, and also what helps me quite good is try to be aware of the why, what triggers it, what makes me feel like that. So you said you focus more on the feeling part, so feel the feelings.
Mm-hmm.
I try to ask myself the question, what is it that makes me actually sad? And sometimes I come to the point where there is fucking nothing. There is literally nothing. And I just make it up in my head. And I my brain makes it somehow worse. Situations that are not bad, where I think, hey, that's actually not as bad as it feels. It's okay. A person, I don't know, have texted back without an emoji or whatever. I dropped something or whatever. These are things that happen. Wow, it's really not a big thing. And so by asking myself this question, I quite often come to the point where I say, there is actually no really reason for it. What helps me to say, yeah, actually, no, stop that. And brings me to a better mood again. And other times where there are special occasions that leads to the low mood, um, the acceptance is a very important part, probably. So, like you said, accept the feeling about it and accept that this is at the moment the case, and do your best about it. So get interaction. If you have a chance to change it, do the best you can in there. Um, so you always can at least say to yourself, I did my best. And
Mm-hmm.
that's everything I can do. Everything else is not in my hands. And I haven't done really affirmations by myself. I mean, I've started a journal during my travels, not a really writing journal, but more like a collage thing. And there was one exercise I did in the beginning with I am, I have, and I can.
Mm-hmm.
And I continued the things. And this is actually my first page.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes come back to this, but what pushes me up more are actually quotes, but probably comes to the same end result as the affirmations. As I have one page that I glued in with quotes that lifts me up and that are the most powerful to me, like you're strong as hell, remember why you started, you don't grow in your comfort zone, be the woman you would like to have as a role model for yourself, something
Mm-hmm.
like this. And this actually gives me a lot of power back. So I'm more the physical person, the visual person. So I literally love to have this book in front of me and, you know, just have a look through. Or I have a Pinterest page that is, I don't know, 5,000 pins or something. And I have one with all over quotes that also gives me a lot of joy. Um, and animals. Animals are always great. I love animals. So if I see them or if I have the chance to pet or hug them, this would be even better. And these are kind of my immediate hacks to lift up the mood a little bit, where you can get into a stage at least where you are more conscious and think. Yeah, actually be conscious and think and not only react. And then you remind yourself of all your knowledge, etc., where you can build up this mood again. One last thing maybe I would like to come back actually to was, you said the best things another person could do when they handle interaction with a person with depression or low moods would be a hug, be there, tell them it is okay how they feel, how they express themselves. It is okay to be not okay, and be silent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I reckon the first three would be the common denominator, probably, also at least for my experiences. With the silence, I have a bit of my problems, as this would actually be exactly the point where myself and maybe others struggled with. It's like some would like to have silence and say everything you say is kind of the wrong thing. And when I remember my mom, she probably, I don't know if this would have been the best to do, but I think that would have been the thing that she would have liked to have at the situation. What is the how did you call it, pity? So
Pity.
what was the term?
You mean like
That,
if you're feeling kind of be like, oh yeah, it's terrible. So your
exactly.
mom would have liked pity.
Exactly. So this was what she would have liked to hear, or she was a bit caught in her suffer and in this victim role. So she wanted to have some empathy about that, what means to me there, where I had my problems with, because I couldn't relate to that, and I actually didn't wanted to jump too much on that, exactly because my intention would have been to push her into the other direction, push her up instead of meeting her down there. The
Yeah,
second
I,
time
I
I did
think
it a bit
pity.
more, but yeah, this
Sorry to interrupt you there.
yeah,
I don't think pity is the right word for that. What she probably wanted is validation. Validation of how she's feeling, validation that you see her situation the way she sees her situation, but not necessarily pity.
how would you have a recommendation how you could express that, for example, the validation without pity?
The validation without pity
Yeah.
would be, for example, yeah, I can imagine that's hard. Like being like, I can imagine instead of it is. Like,
Ah,
because
okay.
if you, I mean, it's just small things, but if you say, yes, that's terrible, or yeah, or poor you, worst thing you can say. So, best example for pity and what not to do would be like, poor you. Ah,
Okay.
like kind of putting your opinion onto them as fact. While
Mm-hmm.
if you say, I can imagine this is hard for you, I can imagine why you're feeling the way you're feeling. I get the way you feel, like I get that. It's more, it has less pity and less judgment with it. But that's just my opinion. But I feel like that's kind of like validating, being like, yeah, I get you. I can imagine that is like, that must be hard, because you can only imagine, because you are not in her situation. So if you say, yeah, that's terrible,
Yeah.
it might come across as, yeah, like, because you're not in the situation. But I would not overthink it, because at the end we all do the best we can do, and it's about like just trying things out. The thing is, we need to come to an end, because my my battery is running out, and also I think we've been going on for a while.
I think that is already a pretty good end, all in all. So yeah, this was just a matter of heart for me to come back to that once more. But thank you very much for the advice. I think that's a pretty good one, and also for our listeners out there. And yeah, actually, this is also a pretty good summary, probably, to our end of the episode. Maybe let's gonna summarize it one more time, so you can tell us what would be your recommendations how to get out of depression. I can maybe summarize once more how other people can help this person to deal with.
To say it quickly, if you're the other person, in my opinion, and that's just my opinion, that's what I would have liked. It's give a hug, be silent, say it's okay that the way they're feeling, and let them feel their feelings. Hard thing to do, I know, but that's just my opinion. And then to summarize, what helped me to get out of my personal depression was getting the mindset that I can change myself, I can change my circumstances, and I don't have to accept things necessarily all the time as they are. You can change things. Then changing my beliefs into positive ones by repeating positive thoughts and beliefs about myself on a daily basis until they become true beliefs. And listening to better frequencies, and kind of like in the morning, starting your day by focusing on things you can appreciate and gratitude. So that's helpful. What I would also say is the best way to kind of like stop the momentum of depression is literally if you can get to a state where you just accept yourself in that moment right now with the feelings you have. Because if you can validate your feelings in that moment, which validation and feeling your feelings means listening to listening and feeling where the feeling is in your body, and paying attention to that without making up stories in your mind, saying to yourself that it's okay to feel that feeling, whatever you're feeling. It's okay to feel the anger, it's okay to feel the fear, that you're there for you and that you still love yourself. And validating feel, because if you can accept yourself in that moment, if you can accept yourself, if you're not like, be okay with not being okay, it immediately releases some sort of resistance we have that prolongs the whole process. So if you just relax into being depressed, if you just accept it, if you just surrender, a lot of the times then your mood flows back up automatically without you even having to do much, just because you stop trying to work against it. Because a lot of times you don't want to feel that way, and because you don't want to feel that way, you keep feeling that way. So a huge tip I can give is just try to be, just for a moment, it doesn't have to be long, but like just try it out for a minute. Just accept, like for the next minute, I'm just going to accept feeling that way, and just going to be completely okay, not wanting to change anything, not wanting to fix anything, and see how that makes you feel. So that's what I would like to leave our listeners with.
Right.
All right.
All right. Then we're coming to an end, actually. And
Yes.
what I wanted to say in the end was that it can be hard also for people around, around this person to be the support they probably need in this situation. As we talked earlier, it can affect them as well. And that's also one of the missions of us, of the Bliss Builders, where we would like to help as well. On one hand, with the podcast, so we hope that you can take away some informations and learnings for yourself. And on the other hand, also with one-on-one listenings, and we are here for you if you need someone to listen, guys, and to help you more personal. So we also do some mentoring and coaching and companionship. So please let us know if you want to talk to us or one of us in person, or also, of course, via some call. We are there for you. And otherwise, we are happy if you follow us on our social media channels on Instagram, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you are listening to us. And if you would like to give us 5 stars, that would be amazing and helps us to keep going with what we do here. And yeah, otherwise, I would say we're gonna see you next time, and you can be excited about some more episodes, also about loneliness and being alone, and also some anxiety, what are topics that came up during the preparation for this episode. And with that, we're gonna say goodbye for this time. See you next time.
See you next time. Thanks for listening.
Bye.